looking back on 5 decades of his life through writing and memories. Matthew McConaughey muses on the importance of green lights in an individual's life. He discusses all the green lights in his, how he identified, created, and chased after them. He talks about the necessity of red and yellow lights in the pursuit of green lights. He shares his entire life story to date, from being raised in an unconventional family and the values they instilled in him to his lonely times in Australia to discovering his passion for storytelling. He talks about falling in love, changing his mind on marriage, his abstinence from the film industry, and his desire for fatherhood. McConaughey also reminisces on his grand adventures of living on the road, running off to Africa, journeying to the Amazon River, wrestling with a champion, and pursuing his passion. He ruminates on how every moment and experience has shaped him, guided him, and made him exactly who he is today. Life hasn't always been easy for Matthew, but every experience is a revered one. He got arrested and resisted it while playing music in his own home. He spent a long time in a foreign country unhappy with no way out of it. His parents beat him. He lost his virginity underage as a result of blackmail. He was sexually assaulted while passed out. Despite it all, he doesn't see himself as a victim. He refuses to be one. These experiences, good or bad, taught him how to live and prepared him for everything that life threw at him. They taught him to master the art of identifying and seizing green lights. Green lights, the yesies, acceptances, blessings, possibilities, chances, and opportunities, are what we all want out of life. It is his firm belief that we hold the power to recognize, come across, obtain, and even produce more green lights in our lives. It is solely our responsibility and choice to turn a yellow and red light into a green one. It's how we put ourselves out there. It's how we receive what the universe has to offer. It's how we choose to deal when faced with problems in life, to persevere or surrender. Matthew has an unconventional family. They didn't live by anyone else's rules except their own. His parents' love language was provoking each other and fighting, then making up and making love. They got divorced twice and married thrice. His parents adopted their second son because their eldest son wanted a brother. Matthew was an unplanned baby and the youngest of 3. His parents were strict but only disciplined him on matters that they deemed important. They didn't care much for societal expectations and rules. His parents made sure he knew the importance of his name, the value of honesty, the power of words, and to never place limitations on himself in life. They didn't care about breaking laws or rules but emphasized the importance of never getting caught. They would punish him immediately for his mistakes, but also bring him out for a celebration once he learned his lesson. His family wasn't perfect, but they had a great deal of love for one another. They were the ones who instilled the values in him that made him the man he is today, a true hustler. For that, he will always be thankful. Both his brothers had to do it in their own way. His eldest brother fought their dad physically to defend what he didn't want to do. When he won that fight, his father respected him from then on. It was the same for Matthew. One time, a bouncer accused his father of not paying for his drinks. Out of reflex, Matthew punched the bouncer and wouldn't stop hitting him. That was the day he became a man to his father. From then on, he was his father's equal. His father's approval and inclusion meant a great deal to him. After Matthew's high school graduation, he wasn't sure what to do with his life. His mother suggested a year-long exchange program in Australia, which he agreed to. He was excited about the beaches, culture, and new experiences. It was only when he arrived in Australia that he realized it was a mistake. Instead of Sydney as promised, he got to live in a secluded town far from civilization. Life was difficult and lonely with his host family. The Dooleys gave him a curfew, told him not to share his opinions, and insisted he call them mom and pop. Being there made him lose his sense of self. He became a vegetarian, began running, and lost weight drastically. Every day was the same for him: work, bath, music, write, and repeat. Life with the Dooleys was hell, but it was valuable in the long run. It was how he discovered a lot about himself. He learned to deal. He chose to persevere. He lived through the struggle. He appreciates the good in his life far more after. It taught him a lifelong lesson. Bad things will always happen, but it was solely up to him whether it became something positive or negative. For most of his life, Matthew thought he wanted to be a defense attorney. His father barely had enough money to send him off to college but made sure he went anyway. It was during his time in college that he realized his interest was really in storytelling. He was scared to admit it to his father. Instead of getting mad and disapproving, the only thing his father asked was for him not to half-ass his decision. One unspoken pact and deal with his father later, he enrolled into film school. He knew grades weren't important in the film industry. It was technique, experience, and presence. He knew he had to put himself out there, so he started skipping class. He looked for jobs and worked to gain hands-on experience. When he got into trouble with the dean, they struck a deal. Matthew didn't mind getting just C's for everything, as long as they didn't mind him missing class. That's what he got by the end of his college career, all C's and work experience. In that period, he wrote, directed, edited, modeled, performed, and watched endless films. During his college years, Matthew worked in a bar for 2 years to make extra money. It was during this period that he got cast in Dazed and Confused. During a random playful session with the director, he put himself in his character's shoes and imagined what he would say. That's how he coined his famous phrase, "All right, all right, all right." He wasn't even supposed to act or shoot that day, but that was how he got his start in movies. A few days into making this film, Matthew's father passed away. It was hard for Matthew to accept that his father, this strong, immovable man, was gone and that he would never get to see Matthew succeed in the career option he had supported. The loss of his father was also the loss of his adolescence. It was the moment he realized that he bore full responsibility for himself now. Matthew kept his father with him by living his teachings and values. He felt it was fate that an ending led to a beginning, losing his father while starting his career. Fame came with its own set of challenges. There was a time when he hustled to make things work. Now that everything was a possibility, he no longer knew what he wanted. Every rejection had turned into acceptance. His mother wanted a piece of his fame. She accepted all interviews, showing the world where Matthew grew up, and told everyone about his private past. The more she did this, the more he distanced himself from her. It would take a few years for him to forgive and accept her back into his life. Being famous made him feel disconnected from his own life. Fame brought a great deal of pressure and confusion. Matthew needed anonymity, space, and the freedom to roam. It was the only way for him to rediscover who he was and figure out what he wanted to work on next. He headed for the Amazon River, which he floated in. It turned into a self-discovery journey. He stripped off everything on him that branded him. Naked, he was simply a being. He felt lighter by the end of it. After that journey, he went home to make more movies. It was one of Matthew's fears that he'd never marry until he had a dream. In the dream, he stayed single until he was old, but he had many children despite that. When he woke up, he was at peace. He realized he didn't need to marry anyone in order to be a father. When he stopped looking for the one, Camilla showed up. She was a confident and independent woman who loved him for all that he was. They began dating. It wasn't long before they moved in together and started trying for children. Camilla gave birth to 2 children, Levi and Vita. One day, Levi asked his father why his mother didn't have the same surname as them. Matthew had to explain that they weren't married. As Levi questioned him as to why that was so, Matthew had to admit that he was worried that marriage meant losing bits of himself. In a conversation with his pastor, Matthew learned that marriage enhanced one's identity rather than strip it away. He knew Camilla was the best person for him. In the end, he decided to propose. They got married right as Camilla got pregnant with their 3rd child, Livingston. At some point, Matthew had been typecasted. For a long time, he was okay with it. Then came a point when he wasn't okay with it anymore. He wanted to be challenged, to be a more serious actor. He decided to say no to every rom-com, going so far as to reject $14.5 million. He wasn't in it for the money anymore. This time, he wanted roles that meant something. For almost 2 years, he didn't act. No one knew what happened or where he went. With luck on his side, Matthew managed to resurface in the film industry as something entirely new. It was a risk he took and it paid off. He persevered and got what he wanted. Matthew started losing weight drastically for Dallas Buyers Club, as his character had stage 4 HIV. He was determined and got down to 135 pounds from 182 pounds. He studied his character's journals and watched his tapes. He was dedicated to his craft and had never been more in love with acting in his life. It would seem that saying no to good opportunities to wait for the right ones instead was the best thing Matthew did for his career. He received his first and only Academy Award for his role in Dallas Buyers Club. Hitting an Oscar for Best Actor was the highest honor for him, solidifying his career as an actor in a volatile industry that's ever-changing. It also meant that he had kept his word to his father of not half-assing it. He went on to make many more great films and is still active in acting today. Matthew was content with life. He was happy with his wife and children. He was happy with his career and the direction it was headed. He could finally focus solely on his own life and himself. Looking back at the past 5 decades of his life in solitude, poring over journals and revisiting old places, he decided to write a book to share the lessons he had learned. Matthew's an adventurer, with his life being the greatest adventure. He's pleased to say that he has lived in a way that makes him happy to look back on so far.